The Victorian State Labor Government handed down its state budget on the 20th of May. On a Thursday afternoon, we caught up with Emma Germano, the head of the Victorian Farmers Federation, to get her initial reactions to the budget, and it's fair to say she was pretty disappointed. Emma, thanks for speaking with us on Flow. It's the budget afternoon. It's all just dropping at the moment. What's your initial reaction for Victorian Farmers Federation?
Look, I mean, we've looked at this and said this is a third-year Labor type of budget. We know that we've got a state that's running out of money. We know that they need to plug the holes from somewhere, and they probably need to give themselves enough runway so that a pre-election budget next year feels like Christmas to everybody. So at the moment, we're thinking it's a little bit light on, and particularly in things like infrastructure and particularly roads. That's a point of real disappointment for us. We see roads and infrastructure as being an investment, not a spend, and would have liked to have seen more dollars being put towards that.
Yeah, when it comes to roads and infrastructure, it doesn't sound like you've had your socks knocked off by big surprise announcements on regional freight routes. What would you have hoped for there, or what can you say about that side of the budget?
I mean, we were only, I think, last week talking about how there's some proposals that we should be reducing speed limits on roads because there's such an acknowledgement that these roads aren't up to scratch for regional people. We also know that, and have been calling for a long time, for investment in rail infrastructure also to get some of these heavy vehicles off the road so that we can keep them in better nick. And we've just seen a real failure to acknowledge that infrastructure spend that's absolutely required to keep the state moving. I think they've said at the current level of investment, it'll take 1,000 years before our roads are up to scratch. So certainly aren't chipping into that in this year's budget, that's for sure.
So the Murray Basin Rail is a classic example, isn't it? The federal government ended up throwing some money into that because the Victorian government was sort of moving away from it. I'm guessing there's nothing in the budget on that front? Well,
I guess that's the real disappointment because, we all know that between federal and state, they like to play games with each other when they're of different colours. But this state budget, I guess, fails to leverage the federal budget that was announced. And we're seeing things like the Shepparton bypass won't happen because states haven't matched on-farm water infrastructure, which was something that we're really, really keen on. That hasn't been matched, so we'll miss out on that funding too. So it's really about, where are all the dollars? We've got this multi-jurisdictional government or governments that overlap with each other, and they don't necessarily work together to ensure that we're spending the money in the best way that we can. So that's a bit disappointing for us because we really would have liked to see the state match the federal stuff so that we got the benefits of both.
Yeah. Now, it's something I've spoken about with representatives of VFF approaching the budget, and we will pick this apart with other spokespeople tomorrow. But is there anything on this levy business, the increasing of land tax, I should say, and how that might land for farmers? Have you got any more detail that you've spotted in relation to that?
Well, we really need to go through and have a proper analysis of, the farm transactions that occur and the increase in the stamp duty. We would like to see farmland being exempt from those increases that have been, not proposed, but announced. And not just that, we're really concerned that by imposing this increase in the land tax where you see a rezoning of property, that we've got a real issue with the amount of accommodation we have out in the regions. And now we've potentially put farmers who may have had the opportunity to actually rezone their land, and most farmers, when they do a rezoning of their land and it becomes housing, go out and buy farms elsewhere. We're saying, well, firstly, that's costing farmers, and secondly, that's potentially going to impede that increase in accommodation that we absolutely know that we are dying for out in the region. So we're yet to put a dollar figure on how much that stamp duty and land tax is going to impact farmers, but we know that it's substantial. So rather than this being a budget that's helped the regions or helped agriculture, in fact, the hidden thing there is that it's probably going to cost us because most of our farms are over the $2 million threshold that the increases apply to. So a bit of disappointment. And it also means that people who have been planning certain things on their farms for maybe decades.
Farm succession, for instance,
all of that, it throws a real spanner in those works, and we're talking big dollars. So we're going to do some more analysis on that and really be calling for some exemptions around that for agriculture.
It's interesting because we've spoken with federal Labor MPs about the housing and homelessness issue in regional Victoria, and yet one of the ways we could address the housing crisis in regional Victoria would have been by allowing that land to come on the market and produce more housing. So state Labor might have played against the national narrative from Mr Albanese that they need to address housing issues.
Absolutely, and I think that's why, not to sound completely jaded, although I probably do, I mean, these PR announcements is all that budgets really are, because it's so difficult to analyse what it actually means compared to last year's spend, or, compared to the previous government or whatever else. So it's so difficult for us to actually ascertain whether we're hearing something good or hearing something bad. And people are just so frustrated because they've got the difference between, state, federal, and then, same parties that you would expect to have, be singing from the same hymn book. Like you just said, they often contradict each other. So it's so difficult for people to really understand which government or which side of government is looking after the needs and being, doing good things with the money that we all pay in taxes, because we shouldn't be patting anybody on the back for spending taxpayer dollars. That's what their job is. They've got to work out what's good for the public and balance the needs and look at whether or not we're going to be stimulating an economy or if we're actually going to be stunting it. And our concern has been that we know regional Victoria has been impacted by the pandemic and bushfires and drought and all of those things.
And lockdowns.
Yeah, and lockdowns, and we've seen that have a bigger impact in the regions than what it's had in Metro, and yet we're just not seeing the stimulus going back into the regions, and that's been a continual concern of ours for some time now.
Well, Emma, appreciate your time on the afternoon of the budget. Much appreciated, and we'll keep in touch with VFF as we further analyse what's in there.
Absolutely. Thanks very much.